Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and we return to In-Depth with our Tzeentch Demons. And this time we are going with Kairos Fateweaver. So recently I did the Lord of Change, and if you watched that video, I'll leave a link in the description somewhere down below for you. You would have remembered that I didn't rate him particularly well. In fact, didn't rate him at all. So Kairos is basically a named version, so a little bit, allegedly, more powerful. It's a couple more points than a regular Lord of Change. But we're going to take a look in depth and see if he's any better. Is he worth upgrading from a Lord of Change to a Kairos Fateweaver version? Give my opinions on what we think. So let's get straight into the video. So let's kick straight into Kairos Fateweaver's data slate. He's an HQ option with a power rating of 19, and according to the original codex comes in at a points cost of 370 points. However, that's been drastically changed in Chapter Approved 2018. Being a creature of over 10 wounds, he has a variable profile based on the amount of damage that he's taken. So let's take a look at the base stats. He has a weapon skill of 3+, a ballistic skill of 2+, a strength of 6, a toughness of 7, 16 wounds, a leadership of 10 and a save of 6+. Now the save we don't need to worry about, we'll get to that in a second. But his variable damage will determine his moves and his attacks, and also his psychic test bonus. Between 9 and 16 wounds he has a move of 12, 5 attacks and +2 to his psychic tests. Between 5 and 8 his move is reduced to 8 inches, his attacks down to 3 and just +1 on the psychic test. And in his lowest profile, when he's really having a bad day, between 1 and 4 wounds, his move is halved down to 6 inches, he only has 1 attack and 0 to his psychic test bonus. Kairos is a single model armed with the Staff of Tomorrow, and you can only ever include one of this model. Unlike the Lord of Change, you can have as many Lord of Changes as you can fit into your army, but with Kairos he is a unique named character, so you can only ever include one of him. Now that Staff of Tomorrow is a melee weapon with a +2 strength, an AP of -3 and a damage of D6, and each time you slay a character with that weapon you can add a chaos spawn to your model in your army, and you set him up within an inch of that character that you've killed. Now as usual, if you're playing match play, any spawns that you do add to your army in this way, you have to have already paid the points in your army to do so. His abilities are Demonic, Ephemeral Form and Demonic Ritual. He's a greater demon, and his aura ability means that all Tzeentch demon units within 6 inches of that model, when they take a morale test, can use this model's leadership instead of their own. So your lesser demons, which are typically around a 6 or a 7 leadership, will then be leadership 10. And he also comes with Foretell. If your army is battle forged, you receive an additional D3 command points if Kairos Fateweaver is your warlord. Important note there, you have to include him as your warlord to get those bonus points. You can't just include him and then name another character as a warlord. He is a Psyker, and he can attempt to manifest 3 psychic powers in each friendly psychic phase, and attempt to deny 3 psychic powers in each enemy psychic phase. Being a Psyker, he knows Smite like all Psykers do in 40k, and he knows all of the powers from the Tzeentch disciplines. You haven't even got to worry about picking which ones you want to take when you start your battle. He just knows them all because he's a clever git. Whenever Kairos attempts to manifest or deny a psychic power, you can use that bonus in that variable profile. So when he's on maximum down to 9 wounds, he gets +2 to each psychic test. And then, as I said, between 5 and 8, he gets +1. His Smite power is not just 18 inches. His Smite power is 36 inches for this model. That is pretty beefy for a range of Smite, which makes him pretty good at dishing out the mortal wounds. His faction keywords are Chaos, Tzeentch, and Demon, and his keywords are Character, Monster, Fly, Psyker, Lord of Change, Kairos Fateweaver. So if you're playing purely from the Codex at 370 points, make sure you're using the Chapter Approved 2018 version, because he was drastically reduced in points all the way down to 285 points. That's nearly a 100-point reduction because, yeah, he was drastically overpointed for what he did. Note those points do include his Staff of Tomorrow weapon. So based off his data slate, let's see what I think of him. Now the immediate obvious comparison is to a regular Lord of Change. And I've done a breakdown, an in-depth series on the Lord of Change already, and I'll leave a link in the description for that below. So as a direct comparison almost with the Lord of Change then, his profile is almost identical other than the weapon skill. Kairos Fateweaver's weapon skill is 3+ compared to the Lord of Change's 2+, but they both start off on the same number of attacks. They both have 5 attacks to start with. However, as they degrade, this is where Kairos and the Lord of Change diverge a little bit, and the Lord of Change drops to 4 and then 3, whereas Kairos drops from 3 down to 1. So actually his combat ability really does suffer the more he gets beaten up. However, in melee, he is that little bit better. So the Staff of Tomorrow giving +2 strength makes him strength 8. And strength 8 versus the majority of most models being 3 or even 4 in most cases, that means he's going to be wounding on 2s, and his beat stick gives out that d6 damage, which is no different to like a Baleful Sword, for example. However, that Baleful Sword only gives you +1 strength, so that +2 strength does make a big difference. His Greater Demon ability, giving that 6-inch bubble for leadership test, giving the lesser demons his leadership value instead of their own, leadership of 10. As I said with the Lord of Change, you know what? Chaff units don't really have to worry about it too much in most scenarios. I'd much rather see a better aura ability from him than leadership. Leadership is, you know, nowhere near as good as, you know, things like -1 to hit or +1 to hit or +1 to wound that you get on most characters, or even plenty of rerolls on the value of 1, for example. One big difference between him, though, is the Foretell ability, where you receive those additional D3 command points. I think demon armies on their own can be a bit spenny on the old command points if you're going to use them effectively. So having those extra D3 before the battle is even started can be pretty damn good. But where this guy suffers in attacks compared to the Lord of Change, he does benefit from being a more powerful Psyker. So the ability to cast and deny 3 powers, that's a little bit better than the Lord of Change, who only has the ability to cast or deny 2. And the fact that you don't have to worry about picking which powers because he just knows them all. Add to that his range of smite going to 36 inches makes him that little bit better than the Lord of Change, because you have to take the Rod of Sorcery for some additional points to increase the range just to 30 inches for that rod. So he already comes with a slightly longer range smite. But other than that, and the points cost, they are vaguely similar, which you kind of expect really, because Kairos is just a named Lord of Change. Now, based off of those chapter approved revised points, Kairos Fateweaver is just 15 more points than a regular Lord of Change, unless of course you start upgrading your Lord of Change with Rods of Sorcery and Staff of Change. That increases him by 5 or 10 points. So actually Kairos isn't that far off when it comes to point values. So the question is, can we make Kairos any better looking at the powers and stratagems and so on? That's always the question I ask myself in these in-depth series reviews. So the first thing to look at then is stratagems, and very much like the Lord of Change, in fact all of these bonuses and buffs are going to be almost identical to the Lord of Change. Magical Boon, just for 1 command point. Use your stratagem at the end of a psychic phase and select a Tzeentch Demon Psyker from your army and can immediately manifest an additional psychic power this turn. Now, having the ability to know all of those psychic powers means that you're basically going to get a free power for a command point. And if he's already generating an additional D3 command points, that's guaranteed at least 1 turn of a free extra power. If you really are trying to push the boundaries on your psychic powers, the Locus of Conjuration for 2 command points allows you to re-roll all failed psychic tests made for friendly Tzeentch Demon units within 6 inches of this model. It can be cast on a Tzeentch Demon character, which this guy is. So another useful one if you really are concerned about getting those powers off. Now, being a named character, let's take a look at the Warlord traits, because he comes with a fixed trait of Tyrant of the Warp. And Tyrant of the Warp means that you roll a dice each time your Warlord suffers perils of the Warp, and on a 2+, your Warlord's Psychic Mastery is so good that you do not suffer perils. Very similar to what Magnus has as well. Basically means that they're really going to protect you from rolling all of those psychic powers. I mean, you are going to be busting out a lot with this guy, so you really want to protect him. So he already comes with that ability. Now, because he is a named character, he cannot take any Hellforged artifacts, so we have to move on from these 2 pages in the book. Specifically, you know, all named characters such as Scarbrand, for example, already have 1 or more artifacts and cannot be given any more, as he is named. And Kairos, basically his Hellforged artifact is his Staff of Tomorrow. So, psychic powers then. I've never been a big fan of the Tzeentch psychic powers. I really do hope that the new Psychic Awakening release that we're going to be having, which is actually on the 23rd of September 2019, if you're watching this a little bit later on, hoping that, you know, maybe there's going to be some more psychic powers that this army can choose from, because basically the Tzeentch discipline isn't particularly great. But he knows all 6, so we don't have to pick and choose which ones are going to be the best ones to take for him. This means that you can pick and choose as the situation determines, and quite often these powers are very situational. So we'll just run quickly through each of them then. So he knows Boon of Change, which means you get a variable ability here. So on a warp charge of 7, which basically means if he's undamaged he's casting on a 5, select a friendly Tzeentch demon unit within 18 inches, roll a d3 and consult the table to see what bonus he receives until the next psychic phase. On a 1 you get an extra limb, giving you +1 attack. On a 2 it's mystic strength, giving you +1 strength. And on a 3 it's iron skin, giving you +1 toughness. He also knows the bolt of change with a warp charge of 8, which means if he's undamaged he's casting on a 6. Pick an enemy unit that's within 18 inches and visible, and that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Again, if a character is slain by this psychic power you can add a chaos spawn, but again you've got to pay the points for it if you are playing match play. Gaze of Fate has a warp charge value of 6, so potentially getting this off on a 4+. If manifested you can re-roll a single dice later during your turn. This is probably one of my favourite ones to use pretty much all the time in the Tzeentch discipline. Treason of Tzeentch has a warp charge of 8, so one of the higher ones, in fact the joint highest in the Tzeentch discipline. If manifested, select an enemy character within 18 inches of your psyker and visible, excluding the opponent's warlord, roll 2d6, and if the result is greater than the character's leadership, you can treat the model as if it was your own. So basically you possess his brain, and you can use him during the shooting, charge and fight phase. Always a difficult one to pull off. I mean, you can cast it, but enemy characters typically have a high leadership, way above your average of 7 on 2d6. So that always makes it a little bit difficult. But when you know all the powers and you can cast 3 and potentially 4 for an extra command point, this one isn't beyond the realms of possibility to use. Flickering Flames is a warp charge of 5, so a really low one. You can potentially get this off on a 3+. And pick a friendly Tzeentch demon unit within 18 inches, and until the next psychic phase, add 1 to any wound rolls made for that unit's shooting weapons. As usual, Tzeentch demons don't do a huge amount of shooting. Flamers, Exalted Flamers and Pink Horrors are pretty much the go-to choices here for this. So if you really are concerned about trying to use Flickering Flames as best as possible, make sure you include lots of shooting units. And finally, Infernal Gateway, a warp charge of 8, so this is the other high one, potentially getting this off on a 6+. If manifested, identify the nearest enemy model within 12 inches of the psyker and visible, and that model and every other unit, friend or foe, within 3 inches of the model suffers d3 mortal wounds. That mortal wound count is increased to d6 if the power is manifested with a psychic test of 12+. So that covers all of his psychic powers. So realistically, what's the best use for Kairos in your army? Now, for the extra points, he is a little bit better, I would say, than your average Lord of Change. And he should be. He's a named Lord of Change. Early in the game, if he's not been shot, he is a bit of a beat-stick monster with those 5 attacks at strength 8. He'd be pretty good at taking out enemy aircraft and then picking on enemy tough units. With ephemeral form and demonic means he's on a 4+ invulnerable save, so he's going to be pretty hard to try and kill through regular saves, because he'll treat any multi-damage high-strength weapon with equal impunity against any low stuff. It's that 50-50 save that he will have, and that's the thing about a demonic army, is that 50-50 save, especially with Tzeentch, all rocking basically a permanent 4+ invulnerable save across the board. Once he starts to degrade though, which is highly likely because he's 16 wounds, he is going to be the target of all the enemies shooting in turn 1, most likely, just to get him off of that top profile. He then just becomes a very, very powerful mortal wound issuer. So if you're casting 3 powers, you'll be looking to do Smite, and remember that's a 30-inch range Smite. You'll be then looking to kick out, say, a Bolt of Change, to kick out d3 mortal wounds. Remember, that hasn't got to be the nearest unit, it's just got to be within range of the ability. And then potentially Infernal Gateway, again kicking out at least d3 mortal wounds to multiple units, especially if they're a horde army all bunched together. And then that can be increased to that d6 damage or d6 mortal wounds if your psychic test is a 12+. Now with that 2+ that he carries with him as part of his ability, the chances of you getting 12+ is pretty hard. 12+ is asking a lot. Basically you're needing to roll an 11. And if you roll a natural 12, you are going to be perils, but you will have that 2+ save against it, but it will still go off. It's a tall order to get off, but it is another mortal wound issuing device. You can really kick out an awful lot of mortal wounds if you get the roll of the dice, if Tzeentch is favouring your particular game that day. What's the best way to kill him then if you are facing a Kairos Fateweaver styled army? Exactly the same as the Lord of Change. Basically put in some decent weapons, multi-damage stuff. That 4+ invulnerable save will not last forever, and you're likely to get some of those through. And if you're carrying some psychers or abilities to remove invulnerable saves or reduce them, you know, Azerani armies, for example, have the ability to reduce saves by a value of 1 to give them a 5+ invulnerable save. Then pile the pain in, he will soon degrade, and once he starts degrading, he's pretty useless. His move gets reduced, which means his offensive capability is reduced, and he's just a great big bat-winged sitting duck for all of those guns. Is he worth taking in an army? Probably not. Let's be honest, these giant chickens are not the best, purely because they can be shot so easily, and they're relying on a 50-50 save all the time. Yeah, 16 wounds is tough, but you know what, 4 decent D6 damage style weapons will soon wipe him off the board. So just as much as the Lord of Change, I'm not a great lover of Kairos. But, you know, thematic and narrative-based games, yeah, go for it. Of course you want to lead a greater demon army with a greater demon. But if you do, you want to be playing those big games, apocalypse-style games, something over 2,000 points, you might want to consider him, just for that big distraction factor. And then you've still got enough points to burn on all of the cool other stuff, all the lesser gribblies that would potentially do more damage. So in summary, if you're playing a regular size game, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 points, I probably wouldn't take him. Exactly the same reasons as I wouldn't take a Lord of Change. So there we go then, guys. Kairos In Depth is now covered, and as you can probably tell from that video audio, I'm not a big fan of him either. For a few more points than a regular Lord of Change, yes, he's probably definitely worth taking. I'd drop a couple of little gribblies just to take the extra 10 or so points that you need to field him. But the reality is, he is just a big target. It says, shoot me right here, written on him. If you don't get first turn, the likelihood is he's going to be seriously degraded, if not destroyed in turn 1. You can't hide him. He's just going to get shot by multi-damage weapons, and you're just going to have to rely on a 4+ ropey and vulnerable save. And, you know, if you're going to get first turn, you're going to get that big smite off at that stupidly good range that he has. But none of the other powers are probably going to be in range, realistically, to do any other damage. And then he's going to get shot in turn 2, and then he's going to be far less effective than he was when he was undamaged. For the points that you're paying for him, I'd much rather take a lot of Heralds, you know, Fate Skimmers and Flux Masters, that kind of thing. You can get sort of 2 or 3 of those for similar value points. I think they'd be much more flexible, less chance of being killed because they're under 10 wounds, therefore they can be screened and not targeted. And I just think you'll get more bang for your buck by using some of those lesser characters in your Tzeentch Demon army. Now, traditional games match play around about anywhere from sort of 1,000 to 2,000 points. Typically around 1,500, 1,750 and 2,000 is the common area to play. So he's going to chew up a good portion of your army, but he's going to be that inflexible that you're probably going to lose him very, very quickly. So I'm definitely in favour of some of the other characters that you can choose, and I'd leave your Lord of Change and your Kairos Fateweavers at home. Save them for Apocalypse, save them for a very narrative-based game where they'll be a bit more flavourful. But if you're playing in match play, no, I'd leave them in the case and go with something else. If you think I'm completely off, comment section below is where you need to be. Let me know what you think. Do you run a Tzeentch Demon army? Are you running Kairos on a regular basis? Or are you saving him for those special occasions? I'd love to know what you think. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I shall catch you guys on the next video.